Man, techies are exhausting. Following the avalanche of videos out now about the Galaxy S21, we saw a frustrating trend from reviewers, dismissing phones like the Pixel 5 from comparisons for really lazy reasons. Tisk tisk, Google keeps using that old camera sensor, and it just can't compete. I don't even need to show you examples. No? That's kinda your job. If it's so easy to demonstrate an advantage, just show us. It really does seem like reviewers are grading Samsung and Apple on an incredible popularity curve. Case in point, the main reason we're concerned about an older sensor is that it's smaller. We can refine a sensor, but one of the main factors that determines image quality is sensor size. It's true of standalone cameras. It's true of phones. Reviewers are so concerned about the Pixel 5 using a smaller sensor, but I'm not hearing the same concern about the iPhone 12 Pro using the same size sensor at a starting price of $999. Seems a little suspect to me. So avoiding the cult of Sam Apple reviewing, let's talk about the sensor size. Is the Pixel 5 really left behind? Regardless of what popular techies will tell you, reviewing a camera is more complicated than just snapping a handful of photos in full auto HDR. If you want to get more out of a camera, you need to drive that camera harder. For this video, I'm sticking with a few of the less search popular brands that often get pushed aside in mainstream camera conversations. And I'm going to use 3 phones for specific demonstrations of different camera technologies. Obviously, after that little mini rant at the top, we're gonna throw in a Pixel 5 because it's a great consumer shooter, full stop. Then I want to take a look at the difference between sensor sizes. So we're going to throw in an Xperia 1 Mark II, which is similar in terms of hardware to an iPhone 12 Pro Max. Now this should show us the advantage of using the same resolution on different sensor sizes. And third, I want to show the advantage of an even larger camera sensor, but one that uses a pixel binning technology. So we're going to throw in a OnePlus 8 Pro. And I'm purposely picking the 8 Pro over my precious LGs to show one of the largest sensors on a phone that bins down to 12 megapixel JPEGs. It's just one step easier for me to compare 3 phones, which all spit out 12 megapixel images. Plus, the 8 Pro gets us pretty close to the sensor size of Samsung's 108 megapixel sensor, which also bins down to 12 megapixel images. So we have 3 clearly distinct camera sensor technologies to test and compare. Photography is more than one thing. Whoever has the most unicorn puke saturation for Instagram doesn't magically win a photo challenge. And what's frustrating is I wholly expect the larger sensor phones to show some advantages. That's an imaging no-brainer. But my prediction is the style of average consumer photography most showcased in techie reviews will be the weakest way to demonstrate differences in sensor tech. I predict we'll see the clearest differences in sensor technology when pushing these 3 cameras to their limits. And one last little bit of housekeeping, if you're watching this on the YouTubes, you're watching a 1080p video, which should do a reasonable job of demonstrating the general quality of sharing a photo on social media. I will be hosting a 4K version of this video on patreon.com/somegadgetguy for a little more pixel peeping, along with a gallery where you can check out the full resolution sample files from the showdown and compare for yourself. All right, that's enough rambling from me. Let's check out some samples. First setup, indoor dim lighting. To start us off, let's look at a pretty common setup for folks shooting on phones, a dim indoor shot. And because of the placement of my lamps, the subject is somewhat backlit. Okay, Which one was the Pixel 5? You didn't think I was just gonna tell you? Come on! You know I'm trickier than that. Isn't it funny how we can always guide a winner when we tell you what the phones are? But when we just show you photos, the results of that kind of comparison become a lot less predictable. According to tech reviewers, the Pixel 5 is so outclassed, it's just obvious to everyone. So it should be really easy to pick out the Pixel in tests like these. Right? But maybe it's a software thing or an algorithm thing. You're right. Let's control this better for one round. Techies claim that Google's software just can't hope to compete against these larger sensors. Let's look at some raw files shot under the same settings. 1/15 of a second and at ISO 100. There's no post-processing here. There's no software advantage for the Pixel. This is as close to a hardware comparison as we can get. Were you able to spot the Pixel? Start writing some notes because I want to see down in the comments below which phone you think was the Pixel. And moving on from here, I'm going to make this harder. Phones A, B, and C are going to change with each setup. I really want to see those comments down below, setup, and then which phone you think was the Pixel. As a brief tangent, for setup number 3. Just to add a little light to this setup, I want to quickly showcase one of the main differences between sensor sizes. Now, this is a lot brighter than how most folks normally keep their homes. I have the equivalent of 5 100-watt light bulbs on this little stuffed pup. But looking at the smaller sensor on the Pixel versus the largest sensor on the OnePlus 8 Pro, we can see how the background is softened up. The 8 Pro produces a subtle but noticeably shallower depth of field. The flip side of that, though, the Pixel's longer depth of field keeps more of the pup in focus. It's easier to quickly frame and capture a shot with your subject tack sharp. The larger sensor can be better for composition, but it's also easier to slightly miss focus. If you catch the front of the pup's nose, the eyes of the pup are going to be softer and blurry. Anyone shooting on Samsung in 2020 knew the frustration of pairing a larger sensor with lame autofocus. It's just something to keep in mind. It's never as simple as saying, this newer thing is the better. There are always trade-offs. There are always pros and cons. Okay, let's get back to that guessing game. Setup number 4, outdoor by the pool. Photography is light. When you have better light, you get better photos. I wonder if a larger sensor is going to demonstrate as much of an advantage in good light. Moving on, setup number 5, a street lamp. Now, let's do a little work at night, looking at the detail we might see in a street scene at night. The light's coming from a lamp in our frame, and these are standard photos, not night mode shots. And all of my night tests are handheld. Setup number 6, ultra low light. If we're going to test night modes, we want to go really dark. These 2 trees lit by one very dim lamp in my condo complex. This is what it looked like through the viewfinder of the Sony. It got dark. Setup number 7, an evil eye street lamp portrait. And now, just for fun, a hard side-lit portrait shot handheld and blind from the rear cameras of each phone. Now, this one was tricky because hitting a hardware button with my arm extended at full length and holding steady was pretty difficult. Okay, that runs our samples. You got all that? Did you write down your notes? Are you confident which phone was the Pixel in every single setup? Okay, I told you the answer for setup number 3, looking at depth of field, but now you have to tell me which phone was the Pixel for the other setups, A, B, or C. For a bit of closing cranky commentary, cameras are complex and beautiful creatures. There isn't one way to win at camera. There are always pros and cons, benefits and compromises. And each camera I reviewed over the last year has been strong in some areas and weak in others. We try to point to one spec as the winner. Maybe it's resolution, maybe it's aperture. This year, it's sensor size, but the reality is way more nuanced. Adding up all the pieces of lens and sensor and aperture, SoC, and the manufacturer's software, there's an incredible range of performance. To say that the Pixel 5 is outclassed because of the sensor completely dismisses all of the advantages of how well the software and post-processing algorithms have been trained for this sensor. And if you think Apple and Samsung have magically solved the physics of photography, I've got a bridge to sell you next. That's just brand fandom, and it falls apart pretty quick when you do blind taste tests. Dismissing the Pixel 5 is lazy reviewing, and only serves to grade Sam Apple on a popularity curve while giving phones like the iPhone 12 Pro a pass for using a similar sensor. Reviewers are doing the job of Apple marketing by conflating iPhone with only the most expensive phone that Apple sells. I think it's intellectually dishonest of Apple to claim both Pro phones have 12 megapixel sensors when only one has the larger sensor. Apple doesn't detail that difference in the spec sheet on apple.com. So it's not quite a lie, but it's not quite the truth. And reviewers should be pointing that out because I can clearly show a hardware advantage. If you shoot in really challenging conditions, like ultra low light, one phone produces a RAW file that looks like this, and another phone spits out a RAW file like this. So if you're crafting your composition and editing after you snap the photo, one phone will give you a better editing base to start from. Is that how you shoot? It is how I shoot, but is it how you shoot? There is an advantage to spending $400 more than a Pixel 5. That's a given. But if you are shooting the same kind of casual point and shoot style pics, I don't think you're going to see a $400 advantage. You don't benefit from a hardware advantage just by spending more. You have to know what those hardware advantages are and shoot to maximize what that hardware can do. It's never the tool, it's always the artist. So drop those comments down below. I'm curious to see if anyone can nail this showdown because I was even a little surprised by some of the results pitting these head to head to head. And a friendly reminder that folks on my Patreon might have a leg up with the 4K version of this video. As always, thanks so much for watching, for sharing these videos, subscribing to the channel. Supporting your favorite content creators has never been more critical than it is today. So I greatly appreciate those of you who do look at the links in the descriptions down below my videos. Maybe you shop a little of that merch. That kind of stuff really does help keep production rolling on this channel. You can check out a full list of all of my affiliates and partnerships on somegadgetguy.com, or you might consider joining the list of names scrolling by on your screen from my Patreon, patreon.com/somegadgetguy. That really is a list of the coolest tech pals on the web, so I hope you'll check them out. Now, you know where you can find me around the rest of the internet at somegadgetguy on the Twitters and the Twitch, and the Facebooks and the Instagrams. And I will catch you all on the next video.